Hello Facebook, Michael Booth here, just going live on Starboard's Facebook to go through the Starboard Sprint. While this all connects and you all start coming online, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Starboard Sprint and sort of my relationship with the Sprint. I guess I started with Starboard over nearly 5 years ago now, back in 2015, I think, at the PPG, and I've been racing the Starboard Sprint ever since. I've been able to win 4 world titles essentially on the Sprint. That started back in 2016 in Fiji, racing 12.6s at the time, and then moving through to 2018 when I won in Hainan, and then last year winning in the ICF first ever World Champs and the marathon distance. So if you guys are tuning in right now, we are going to be talking about the Starboard Sprint in a couple of minutes, but at the moment just giving you guys a little bit of an intro on the Sprint and how it's sort of been a really successful board for me. My name is Michael Booth. If you want to check out my social media, it's @_Michael Booth on socials, on Instagram, and Michael Booth on Facebook. I've been racing these boards now for 4 or 5 years. They're incredible race machines. I've had a lot of input, luckily, with the team. We've had Ollie O'Reilly, Sven Rasmussen. We had Connor Baxter. Daniel Hasulio has had a lot of input as well. Trevor Tonnington in this board. So there's a whole group of people sort of working for these boards each and every year down at Taco Lake in Thailand, making these boards better and faster for everybody around the place. So if you wanted to check this out a little bit more, we're going to run through the little different aspects of the Sprint, why the nose has changed, why the board's got a little bit narrower, why there's a little bit more like concave rocker at the back of the board. There's a little bit less concave and all that type of thing. So we're going to start running through that just in a moment. Slowly, gradually, people are getting more and more online, which is great to see. If you want to write in the comments any questions that you are having, this might be getting cross-posted across a few different channels. So if you have any questions about the Sprint, please write them in the comment section below, and I will get to them as we get towards the end of this broadcast. But it's pretty cool to see everybody. It's been a pretty crazy year, not being able to race, not being able to travel, not being able to see our friends and family. So it's good to be able to connect in this way, and it's I'm sure it's nice for you guys to sort of see how we've sort of made this board and why it's better. So these design processes usually take about 12 months to make these boards better, and we sort of go back and forth with different design ideas throughout the team to make the Sprint and all the race board and the hard board range better. So I think it's probably good enough about time to run through the Sprint. I'm just going to give my little bit of insights as we go along, and then I've got a bunch of questions here. So if you have any questions, this is live, so please put them in the comments. So I'm just going to spin the camera around and we're going to film the board. All right. So this is the new Starboard Sprint 19.75. This is my own personal one. Now, the Sprint has a new, boxier, sort of more, boxier, harder nose. It's got giving us a little bit more of a tracking edge, and it's a bit sharper. If you have a look at this nose here, it's a lot sharper through this section through here. It's a lot boxier through this section. And why we've done that is to make the board a lot more poppier, making it accelerate quicker onto chop. It's actually, I might turn around a little bit. So it's actually the same design nose as the 2019 Hainan World Championship board that we made especially for that race. So it was a 12.6 by 21.5. We've sort of moved that nose across. So that was back in 2018 when we had that nose for that Sprint. So we brought that onto the new boards because we found it was a really good nose for acceleration. It popped through the chop a lot better, but it also gave a fantastic tracking ability of the board. So when you're getting on a run or you're getting on a swell, you're sitting on chop, it's allows you to really maintain that good glide, that good pace, but also helps you pop through the waves a little bit better, and allows you to monitor the different chops and the different people around you. So that's why we mainly brought that in. I've really been liking it. It sort of gives me a little bit more lift and allows me to accelerate that little bit faster. You have noticed that a lot of people sort of always talk to me about the Sprint and how we brought in, where's the best angle to do this, and how we put a little bit more volume onto most of the boards. So this year's model, the 19.75, is sort of like the 20.75. We've just reduced that couple of inch, or that 1 inch from each side. So you actually see that the rails of the board are very similar on the outline. So starting sort of here, it sort of stays the same on this rail that comes along here. But as you get to here, we've sort of brought this rail in slightly, and same on the other side. But you'll actually see that you don't lose stability, because you can see with this shadow of this light here, you can actually see that we've dug this rail section out. So you can actually tell that there's actually the similar standing area from last year's board to this year's board. So even though we've made the board 1 inch narrow, we've gone 19.75, which I think was probably an industry first, but we're really excited about that because it does give a better glide, better like higher maximum speed, because you don't have as much wetted area. You're not going to get as much drag, and then you're able to maintain that speed, especially when I'm doing these marathon races and I'm trying to maintain the best pace. That's where I'm going to get it from. It's all these small little changes that we're making. There's refining in these boards and making them faster. So you've also got these drainage systems here. So we've got the 2 drainage holes right here. And a lot of people ask questions actually about standing area. So on this board, I'm actually standing, so there you've got the 2 handles points. So I'm actually standing, my front of my toes are about here on this board. I've really been working on that lately to find out that perfect area. So you also have the 2 handle straps. I mainly use this one, and I basically putting the board on my hip. So when I'm actually running into the water, I'm using this strap mainly, as you can see it. And then I think Connor likes to split his strap, so he has the one up in the left at the front and then one at the right at the back. I think Daniel may do something similar. I haven't really watched too much of his starts, but there's a little bit of different variance into people's different starts, so there's no more further back than that. They've got like the 4 holes that you can see, so it gives you plenty of options for your straps that you're putting on the board. Now, we've talked about the nose, we've talked about the width of the board, and we're talking about the dugout sort of section here. So you'll also notice that we have quite a sloped deck, which allows the board not to flood as poorly. So now you sort of see how the board's quite flat through this area, and that was something that we really focused on this year, making sure that this sort of area is really nice and flat, so we're not going to be sort of paddling uphill or downhill. So like you don't want your feet to sort of be right on your toes, and you don't want them to be back on your heels. You want them to be quite flat. So that's something that we really worked on. And then having that sort of tapered runoff to the back, allowing you to easily walk back across the board. And then you've got this sort of like tapered edge at the backs, which allows you to actually turn the board a little bit more successfully, because if you have a really boxy tail through here, you actually have a lot of board to sink. And when you're trying to sink the board, you're not going to be as effective in spinning it. So that's something that's allowed it. So you can actually see how it sort of comes down at the back here, but then it sort of rolls down into that standing area. And then you have those really nice straight parallel rails that allow us to get that extra speed now. So I will go into a little bit more depth of the board, but just a reminder, if you have any questions on anything that I'm saying, I'm being a bit confusing or anything like that, be sure to write them in the comment section on the Starboard SUP Facebook page. I know it's been shared across a couple of different mediums, so make sure you're writing in the Starboard SUP Facebook page. So you can also look at the rails as well from this sort of side angle. So you notice that they're like quite a little bit angled up. This is allowing us to sort of allow us to have that better stability and allow that water not to reach into the deck. Quite thin top rails, keeping that nice and even smooth lines through the board, and having that water run off quite nice. You've also got a tapered deck at the top, like most sprints. So you'll see the line through the top here. It's just tapered down, so as the water runs up, it does run across. There is a few questions actually about where the water line should be on these boards. So I like these boards to have a nice sort of run, sort of coming across here and then coming down. You don't want the water to be down here and then having a gap, because you're not using the full 14 foot of the board, and you also don't want the board to be diving, so you don't want the water to be over here. So you've got to be really finding that happy medium where the board's cutting through the water, coming through here, and then it's coming down. So that's something that's really important, I find, for myself. And then you've got this nice smooth bottom through here. So I'm going to show you the rear tail. So one of the things that we were finding with the design of the board initially was that the board was kind of sinking once we were sort of designing a little bit. So we'll find the board was coming down a little bit because we've changed the concave on the bottom. We've actually brought it down. So what we did was we actually brought the rocker up slightly at the back to keep that nose up and planing, which we found was a lot more effective and made the board a lot faster. So I'm going to show you that now. So there is a slight rocker at the back here. If you run along the board, you can see it's quite flat. Then it sort of has rockers at the front and then at the tail. This allows the board to plane much more effectively. And I really like the logoing on these boards as well. The new Sprint really stands out, and the Starboard logo. So I think it's looking pretty fantastic. Overall colours and everything. So it's a board you definitely want. So while I flip it over, just be sure that you're asking any questions. That's what I'm here for. I know a lot of people are always writing to me on Instagram and Facebook, asking me which board they need to get or which board is there for their stability. So if you have any stability questions, you have any questions about construction or anything like that, be sure to ask. So just turn it over now. Oh, all right. Now we're going to look at the bottom of the board. So you can see that we've got quite a sharp cutting sort of section at the front of this board here. I'm trying to make it a bit flatter. I can't make it any more flatter, that'll have to do. So it's really nice and sharp, so it's really going to cut through the water really nicely. And then it comes through and it's nice and smooth through this front section, and then you've got these nice rolled rails through the front. So that's just allowing the board to sort of set up its fixed position through the water, and then it's going to come through into these chamfered rails. Now the chamfered rails just help a little bit with stability. When you're sort of paddling and you're sort of getting a little bit more unstable, you're going to need these rails to sort of give that little extra stability, but you've still got it rolls into quite a sharp rail through this section here. You have your nice drainage holes to get the water off the deck, and then you've got these flat planes through here, which allow for that nice stable positioning. What we still have is the concave. Now the concave was brought in just to give the board the ability to go narrower but be more stable. But as the boards have progressed, as the boards get more stable, and as we as paddlers get better, we're allowing for better paddling because everyone's getting faster, everyone's getting more skilled. So as the concave needed to come up because we wanted to get faster, we don't need that stability as much anymore. So depending on your ability level, depends on which type of board that you're going to get. But we're finding that these boards are really, really good and really, really fast, and they're only getting faster. Now, so you've got the normal fin box at the back. I believe the boards come with a race fin. You'll find the boards are really nice and flat at the back of the board. This is allowing just more stability on the tail. So what we had initially was we had like these concaves coming through here up to a flat plane. We found that was really unstable when you got back on the tail. So we made the back of the board much more flat, which allows you to just have more stability when you're stepping back on rail. You'll see the chamfered edges sort of tapers back into this corner, and it's nice and good. So I'm going to run through some questions now. If I've missed anything, please let me know. All right, so I have some questions here from previous people who've written in on Instagram. So the first question is how to compare the Sprint to 2020. So if we compare the 021 to the 020, we're usually trying to make that board one step faster than the year before. So we're trying to make that board at least over 50 strokes and make that board one length faster. That's usually the goal for the Starboard Sprint because we're trying to make it an all-round board. So that's the difference in speed. You're probably finding that each board is probably on average about 0.2 to 0.3 kilometers per hour over an average distance of about 5K. That's how I'd guess it. That's not scientific, that's not from Starboard, that's just my personal opinion. The boards are always getting faster. So for us, when we're sort of averaging around those like 10.5, 11 kilometers an hour, we need these small changes to make these boards that little bit faster. Now, there's another question here, is there a perfect paddler weight for these boards? I think not. You're finding guys and girls, so you've got Fiona and Sonny who are very different in size and weight. you got myself, you got Daniel, you got Connor, all paddling the sprint. So at 19.75. So there's a very sort of very sort of weight limits and size and structure. So these boards are very all round. They're not really custom boards. Like the boards that we race on are the boards that the customers do get. So that's something that you guys should always know. There's no perfect paddle weight. I think it's all about your ability level. It's the amount of time you spend on the water. It's the amount of time that you spend paddling, and it's how much you enjoy it and how much you want to achieve. Is that consistency that's going to make you better? So there's another question here. How do I find it in bumpy beach breaks? So sprint's probably not as good for a beach break unless it's really small, unless you've got like a small break that's going to be nice and flat and easy for you to get in and out. If you're going to use a bumpy beach break, you're probably going to want to use an All-Star. I think that's going to be a board that's going to be better suited to those conditions. It's got a little bit more rocker, it's a little bit more forgiving, and it allows you to sort of twist and turn and get through those chops a little bit easier. You definitely could use it. Like I've used the sprint in events like PPG before, but when it's been quite flat, quite calm, quite easy to paddle. So that's sort of like the difference. There is a very big difference at the moment between the All-Star and the sprint, and I'll go into that a little bit. We found that when we put the concave on the sprint, it was the fastest, and when we put the convex on the All-Star, it was faster. It was quite an interesting sort of scientific project, I guess, between the two boards. So, but we found that the convex did work better on the All-Star and the concave worked better on the sprint. Not entirely sure why, but it did work. So that's the thing that we came to, and that's why the boards are different in that respect. From an interesting username, have you ever tried to see the max speed of the All-Stars or sprint boards different width? I haven't personally done testing in terms of like over 200 meters, how fast I paddle, because it's hard to sort of do that at that time when we're testing those boards. We're trying to make that board faster against the previous year's model, but then as the boards are stepped up, they're not just like a carbon copy of that board blown up. That next board is tested. So if you've got the 19.75, then when they do test the 21.5, then the 23.5 is tested, then the 24.5 is tested. It's not just one size fits all. It does start from the fastest board, but then all the boards are gradually changed to make sure that they're the most stable, the fastest, and the most forgiving for that person. From M. Jones, why the taller bow? Does the volume really make much of a difference? So the volume is really important for these race boards. When you're looking at the sprints, they are a little bit boxier, but it does allow them to be a little bit more all rounds, because if you've got like a really low volume board with not a lot of, I guess, boxiness or taller bow, you're not going to be able to like project the board through chop. You're not going to be able, the board's going to be coming across the deck. You're not going to be able to control that board as well. That's what makes these sprints such a good all-round board in sort of lighter winds, up to like 13 to 15, probably 13 knots is probably like starts to push it. But if it's directly behind you, then that changes it up. But that's why the volume makes a difference. I'm actually probably one of the biggest culprits in putting the more volume on the boards, because as we go narrower, I am the heavier sort of rider. I think you sort of see Daniel around 68, probably Fiona's less than that, Sonny's probably less than that, and then you've got Connor's probably around that 70 mark, and then I'm towards more 80. So I'm sort of trying to bring up that volume to make sure that I can have a board that is going to be suitable for a lot of different conditions, but also suitable for my weight. So yeah, the volume is really important, and having a taller bow is important, definitely. Oh, and then on that point, going in and out. So if you're going into the chop, you definitely want more volume, because otherwise you're going to dive into every single run. And that's the good thing about that boxier nose too. It lifts, it accelerates, and it makes it a lot quicker. Which configuration is more stable? Sprint in 12.6 by 23.5 or 14 by 21.5? I'd say they're relatively similar in stability. As you get shorter into that 12.6, you do lose a lot of stability. So having that 1.5 foot length more, you gain a lot more stability. Like if you go even longer to like an 18-foot board, you're going to have more stability. You're probably going to be able to go narrower. So yeah, probably about the same, but maybe the 12.6 could be a little bit more stable. I haven't really tested the stability on both those boards recently, so that's my guess. How many times, it's not really relevant, but David Alpina, how many times do I train on the water a week, and how many times in the gym? Depends on where I'm at. If I'm paddling a lot, it'll be sort of 7 times a week. And then a couple of gyms and a couple of runs and a few mixing up the training. But we won't go into that too much. It's more about the sprint today than it is about my training. Stan Mealy wrote, "Why is the drainage hole positioned right at the place where you want to have your toes and feet?" Well, because that's the place where the water is running to. So if you put the drainage hole up the front, where it's sort of coming up again, the water's not going to drain from your board, and you're actually going to have a lot of water on the deck of your board. So those two spots are actually tested where they're going to be the lowest points of the board, where the water's going to be running off. You should be able to put the ball of your foot slightly in front of those first drainage holes, so that's where I've got them at the moment. But sometimes I actually like having my toes in those drainage holes, because it actually gives me a little bit more stability, especially with that dugout section on the side of the board. Jamie Morales said, "Are these boards similar to another brand?" I have absolutely no idea. I don't test these boards against other brands. I actually don't paddle other brands' boards. I only work on the Starboard SUP range. What is my height and weight? Currently I'm 80 kilos and 172. If I'm at race weight, I'm down around that 75 kilo mark, and I'm 172 centimeters then as well. Universal Health and Performance. Could you take a guess at the speed difference average kilometers per hour between the widths of the sprints? I'm going to say between the 19.75 and the 21.5, you're probably going to see not much difference over, say, about like 200 meters and that type of thing. But average gliding speed, I think, say over an hour, you might sort of lose maybe like 0.3, 0.2, because you're going to have to try hard to plane harder and higher on that board. So you're going to be pushing a little bit more. Let's go to the next one. How is the Sprint 2021 compared to the 2021 All-Star? I'm assuming we're comparing the 19.75 to the 21.5 All-Star, 22.5 All-Star. You'll find that they're a little bit. You find the sprints probably. They're both pretty stable. I think it depends on your ability level and how much you train on it. I think people get a little bit intimidated by boards if they don't go out and test them regularly, or they don't paddle them at least 10 times. Like some people like paddle a board once and go, I don't like it, but you can't really get a proper gauge of that. So it's really important to get out there and test those boards out and actually paddle them a lot. So they're very different boards and they've very different setup, but they've definitely got their own places. I think the Sprint's definitely for the flatter, lighter wind sort of stuff, and the All-Stars when it gets a little bit messier. It's pretty good downwind, upwind board now. It's probably your best all-round board, but the Sprint's going to be better in those lighter wind conditions where you really want to get that nice average speed and you want to be able to keep up with those top guys. Next one is, what is the best Starboard All-Star for all-round rides in the open water? That depends on your ability level. Depending on the same with the Sprint, you've got to really know that your ability level and know how fast you are, know how good you are, and know that. I think a lot of people try and go too narrow with their boards. Like they see, like Connor Baxter paddling a 19.75 and they want to paddle a 19.75, which is totally understandable. But at the end of the day, you've got to paddle to your ability. Like the fastest board is the upright board. So if you're falling in or you're finding it really hard as soon as you get in those choppy conditions, you've got to be making sure that you're on the right width board. So the best board is the most stable board, the one that you can maintain pace on, and the one that you can just continually paddle on with the best of your ability. Like you put force on each stroke and you're not freaking out. If your legs go after 40 minutes in a distance race, you're all done anyway. Or if you're really like, if you're paddling in a technical race, you might want to go wider even, because then you've got a little bit more stability, and that sort of speed difference isn't going to count as much. Like these are all these different factors that you've got to weigh up when you are making these decisions. Best board to buy as a beginner. If we're talking about the Sprint, I don't know if it's a beginner board, but I think it's the widest one is about 25. So you could potentially get that if you've done a little bit of paddling beforehand, but you probably wouldn't buy it as a beginner. You'd probably be looking at a touring or a generation, or you could even go down to like a Whopper. A Whopper is probably the best board that you can buy as in terms of a beginner board. If you just have, like you've never paddled a board before, you don't even know which way the paddle goes around, but you've done a little bit of SUP paddling and you want to race, I'd always go for the widest board in the range and then gradually step it up. What size, M. Jones here, what size condition would you make the switch from a Sprint to an All-Star and to an Ace? I've touched on this a little bit already, but I'd use a sprint probably up to like 10 to 12 knots, maybe 13, sort of like the maximum. All-star between that 13 to 22, I think that's sort of where it's going to be working the best. And if it's beach break conditions, or it's maybe like even some people will like it better in the sprinting conditions, just depending on how you're paddling and how that sort of lift is going to be generated for you. And then sort of after that sort of 22 knots or 20 knots, you can have an ace. But it depends on what paddling you're doing. Like if you're only going downwind, then the ace is going to be the perfect board for that, because it's actually built just for downwind and a little bit of upwind, a little bit of messier conditions. Whereas the All-Star sort of really encapsulates everything. So if you want a board that sort of does everything well, and you can only buy one board, and you've got those really messy conditions a lot, and then it also probably is better for you. But if you're generally paddling on like rivers and lakes and flatter conditions where you're not getting those crazy swells or wind, you probably want to sprint. So yeah, you've really got to weigh that decision up. And the best thing is to sort of talk to a lot of different people and ask your peers about like what their opinions are of like where you're at with your paddling, or text me on Instagram like a lot of people do, and ask me questions, because I'm always happy to help out. Geo Macri said, hi, I would like to know what is the width of your board they are using at races? Well, I use the 19.75 sprint. Yeah, that's pretty simple. And then the 22.5 All-Star, the 21.5 Ace. And then there's one from Avamia 24. How stable is your 21.5 Sprint 021 compared to the 2019? If we're talking 21.5, I'd say the new 21.5 is definitely more stable. It's just been worked on a little bit more. We've found different areas where we can create stability, like digging out that rail, having a little bit more of a chamfered edges, creating those planes that are like making it a little bit flatter, and then obviously having that a bit more of a flatter tail as well. It's going to allow you to sort of maneuver the board a little bit. Now, I think we had some questions on the stream. I'm just going to go through them. Only being one, Pete Herney said, a 12.6 question, being only 168 centimeters tall and 77 kilos, would a 14-foot board be quicker for me than having a 12.6 board? 14-foot boards are generally faster, as long as you can stand on them, as long as you can control them. 12.6 boards can be better if you're not trying to be as performance-driven. If you just want to go out and enjoy the water, then a 12.6 board sometimes fits better on people's roofs or in people's garages and that type of thing. But 14-foot boards have become the norm for most of the races, because it is just a faster class, because it is a little bit longer. I'm just going to keep scrolling through these. Be sure to add some comments in the bottom if I haven't touched on anything that you guys want to know. Someone said the board is amazing, which I agree with. Will I be reviewing Doug Vokjo? Will I be reviewing the All-Star as well in the future? Hopefully, yes, I will be doing one. I haven't got the All-Star here with me at the moment, so as soon as it is made, it is in Thailand, but I'm just struggling with the shipping at the moment, and I'll be getting to it as soon as I can. Ping said she loves the red nose. I like the red nose as well. It looks fantastic. I think it really gives that sort of bit of an edge and makes the board look really, really racy at the moment. So I think that's all for the comments at the moment, guys. Oh, here we go. Oh, somehow I didn't get to the bottom. How does the sprint bottom contour developed and changed to get to 2021 in the last years? Well, so I think when I first started with Starboard, we had the Starboard sprint with the rails that sort of came to the back, and then you had that open section at the back, and then, well, that was really bad on the turns. You just had your deck fill up, and that was sort of a bit more of a flatter bottom. And then we've added the back of the board in to sort of make that turning circle a little bit better. And then we created quite a deep concave at that stage, just to allow the boards to come narrower. Because I think I first started racing on a 23, then we came down to 21.5, and the concave was created to make the boards more stable. And then as we've sort of gotten better, as the boards have gotten better in different areas as well, and we've learned how to create stability, like say in the nose or in the tail or with the volume, the board has gradually moved through the years, and actually we've actually got less concave now. We've got more of a flatter bottom, but more smoother rails, and we've made like slight different changes, especially at the front. Like you'll see the front of the board, as I showed before, like a flatter section at the front, and then it sort of rounds, and then it goes into that sort of light concave through to the back of back of the board, and then we've got that flatter bit at the back. So there's just a lot of different slight changes that have sort of gradually stepped up. And we found that bringing that, we've always testing like, do we add more concave? Do we add less concave? If we go narrower, do we have to add more in? Do we have to change the rockers? Because every time that you change the concave, you change the rocker of the board. Because if you think about how the board runs through that concave and comes to the back, you've got a different concave depending on how deep you put that concave. So it's like there's a lot of testing that goes on there, and that's why it takes a few months to get these boards right, and that's why the whole team tends to fly over at the start of the year and make sure that board's going to be the best board to release for that next financial year. Difference between wood carbon and carbon sandwich on a competitive level. It depends how competitive you are. So for me personally, I would always paddle the carbon sandwich boards because they are a little bit stiffer, they are a little bit faster. Just purely on like weight and the way that the board flexes. The wood carbon is still a good cost-effective way to make the board, and that's why it can come in a little bit cheaper. You'll find it'll just be like that little bit slower. It's not a massive difference. It's just something that is a personal preference depending on, but if you can afford the carbon board, I'd always go the carbon board. But yeah, you probably will just find that it's just a little bit harder to glide. It's a little bit, it's just not going to be as fast. There's not anything wrong with it performance-wise. Like if you're just going down doing your local races and you're going down and having a good time, it's a fantastic board to get. But if you want to win world championships, you get the carbon board. Hi, Mum. Thanks for signing in. JP Ippolito, does the foot steering change at all with the narrower setup on the 2021 sprint? Assuming you mean a step back steer, I find it's actually on the 2021 sprint, I'm finding it's a little bit more stable because we have added that flatter section into the tail of the board. When you do that, you sort of, instead of having that sort of loose concave and you sort of got a lot more bulk there, we've sort of brought that tail down, made it flatter, and allows for that more easier turning ability for the sprint. So I'd say it makes it easier. Hi, Andre from Chile. Thanks for signing in. Mark Hewitt is 190 pounds. Where's the narrowest I can go volume-wise? Okay, you've got me on the spot here. How much is 190 pounds? I think 190 pounds is around 85 kilograms. I'm going to search it in the background here because I don't know 190 pounds. Okay, yeah, 86 kilos. I was pretty close. Where is your narrowest you can go volume-wise? It really depends on your ability. I'd probably put you on a 21.5 starboard sprint, but it really depends on the skill level of you and how much paddling you've been doing, how confident you feel on a board, and how strong and how fit you are. But at 86, probably the 21.5 is going to be for you. Thanks, Mark. Paul Urum again. How much stability are you losing? For example, down from 22 inches to 2021, 21.5. Is the average paddler actually able to go faster while losing a bit of stability? Theoretically, yes, you will go faster if you can paddle the board successfully. If it's a dead flat day, you'll probably feel comfortable. Like one of the local guys here, Derek Cross, jumped on my 19.75 and he could paddle it, no worries. He was paddling the 21.5 from 019 and he jumped on the 19.75 and could paddle it, but he said he would probably go to the 21.5 021 board because he would feel more stable on it. And it was a pretty flat day and he could definitely get along with it, but you've just got to get used to like that really good technique where you've got that nice stance. I'm probably going a little bit into technique here, but like knees forward, like nice sort of like hip hinge, and you're sort of really controlling everything, and that's where you're sort of able to get away with that narrower stuff. But if you're talking about the average paddler, I would say that the more stable board is going to be a better board for you. If there's any more questions, feel free to put them down. There's Starboard SUP have actually put in the link to all the hardboards, so please check that out. All right, if there's any more questions, please feel free to send them through. I'm just going to run through some specs for you guys. These are all on the website, so it's pretty easy to check it out. If you're going for the newer boards, you're paddling the 20.75 from last year, 19.75 is probably the board for you. That's what it's replacing. If you've got the 22, go to the 21.5. If you've got the 24, go to 23.5. And then you've got that new addition in the 25 sprint this year, which I think is a really cool option for those guys who are sort of struggling on those narrower sprints. You've also got the sort of the weight ranges. These like very generic, and they're not really based on paddlers' abilities or anything like that, but they are sort of a bit of a guide for you guys to find out what sort of weight you should be paddling at. So at 19.75, we're suggesting like 50 to 80, which is sort of the suggested weights that we were talking about with a few of the elite dream team guys. 14 to 21.5, sort of 50 to 90 kilos, I think. That's sort of that's really basing around ability levels. Like, it's not just a given size and volume for a certain weight. Like, you can't just go, you're 60 kilos, you got to paddle this board. You're 85 kilos, you should paddle this board. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's really based around how much you've been paddling, your ability, and how good you want to go, essentially. You got the 23.5 now. It's rated 70 to 100. And 14 by 25 that's rated up to 105 kilos. So these boards do have a lot of volume in them. I do find that the more volume you get in these boards, the better you're going to go. So I've always been a big fan of the boards with a little bit more volume. I'm just going to run through a couple more things. In case I've missed anything, I'm just running through the website, so feel free to throw some questions in. I'll probably wrap this up in about 5 minutes, so if you have any last questions you want to throw out there, please let me know. We've got the drain covers as well that actually go over the sides of the board, so they just create a little bit more of a vacuum and sort of allow that sort of water to run out a little bit easier. If you can check that out on Starboard SUP. So this is a hard website for me. sup.star-board.com. You can find out all the hardboards. Marek, hi Marek, Michael, how you going? So I think I've run through basically everything that's on here. I did want you to check out the volume sizes. Here they are. So at the 25 wide, you've got a board at 350 litres, which is a lot. I think that sort of will float most people. I reckon, up to 220. I think that's 100 kilos. I think you'll be fine on that board. You'll be finding that even when you're coming down to those narrower sizes like 19.75, I think 80 is pretty firm. That's sort of where I'm at, and I'm a little bit probably over that at the moment. So on the 19.75, you're probably wanting to be under that 80 kilos to make that board a little bit more efficient. And then you've got the 21.5 at 330. I think that'll comfortably hold that sort of 90 kilos as it suggests. I'm sort of backing up all these statistics here. I think up to 100 for that 350. And then you've got that board that's going to be able to work in all those different conditions. So you're going to have a really good time on these Starboard sprints. So I was pretty devastated that I wasn't able to race them this year. I think it was going to be a really good all-round board, and I was going to sort of race in Carolina and Europe and all these different places again. But COVID's obviously affected the whole world at the moment. So I'm very happy to be here in WA and safe and not really having to worry about it too much. But if you guys have any more questions, there's no more questions on here. So I might start wrapping this up. Thanks everyone for watching. Here we go. Just a couple more questions. Greg Booth, Dad, thanks for signing in and watching me. What board should I paddle? I'm a little over 90 kilos. You want to get a 10-6 by 34 whopper. That's your board. That's what you want to get. You don't want to talk about this race board stuff. Marek, specs wise, why is there such difference in rider's weight between the All-Star 14.22.5 and 14 by 23? I don't have the All-Star stuff in front of me. We're doing an All-Star talk in a couple of weeks, so I'm sure we'll be able to fill in all the information for that one. This is just mainly to talk about the Starboard sprint tonight. Guys, if you want to find out any more about the Starboard sprint, please check out the website, check out any of the social media channels. Everyone's super approachable, so just reach out to them, ask questions, and we'll help you get the right board that you need. If you need any more information, just DM us. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys are having an amazing day, night, depending on where you are. I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.